This is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Well, good morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and today we are discussing bad stage managers, finding a job, speaking programmer language, and inexpensive controllers, all on this episode of Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore area of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
I think you should go down next time. You always go up. You need to go down.
You mean Lumen Brothers?
I don't know. It just always seems high-pitched to me. I don't know.
I like a high pitch.
Yeah?
You know?
Okay.
Anyway, yeah.
That's how Mickey Mantle was. You never want to throw something high to him.
You never. It did go right out of the park. Right out of the park.
Throw us a low ball, you know?
we throw low balls all the time on this show. So, hey, everybody, welcome to episode 163. And for those who had a chance to listen to our incredible, if we don't say so ourselves, interview with Chad Tiller last week, we highly recommend that you do. That was episode 162. Chad was great and got a lot of great feedback from that one. You know, everyone wanting to know about color and the future of gel and all that other stuff. So check it out. That was episode 162 with Chad Tiller, or Chad Rosco Tiller. So welcome to 163.
I want to give a shout out to Chad, and I just want to say thank you for the 3 mix books. I really appreciate it.
Did you get 3?
What? Wait a second. I haven't gotten any mixed book.
and the keychain and the Rosco tour jacket. I mean, and the Rosco leather pants. I mean, thank you.
Did they name a color? Did they name a color? Is it Woods Amber now or Woods Blue? Is there a...
No, it's Walk in the Woods Green.
Walk in the Woods Green. I love it. That's great.
I am torn apart. So obviously I'm the only brother that is not a favorite anymore.
He might send me another half a dozen, and I'll shoot one out to you.
Well, you're special in
$100.
other ways, David.
Thanks a lot.
You have
Thank
other
you
special
so much.
characteristics.
By the way, everyone call Rosco this week. They have a special mix books for $10. So just call your local Rosco dealer and tell them that Chad Rosco Tiller sent you. Okay, so there you go. Just kidding. Don't do that.
Just type in Lumens in the promotion box.
Right. We love the Lumen Brothers, and you get a free mix. Well, you get a mix book. You got to pay $10 plus shipping.
And that's an idea there. You know, special discounts for listeners. You have a little box. You fill it out. We give you the code. That's good.
So this week, Steve hosted. It was one of the hosts, because it was your school hosting, right?
Yes.
Design Showcase East. And I was able to be a part of that, and I interviewed some amazing students, I think 15 lighting students. And Steve, why don't you tell us how it went?
Well, it was a 3-day event, as you know. No one had tried this before. We put together 650 interviews over a 3-day period. We had about 6,000 hits on the student portfolios. So, you know, I think it was successful. I mean, there's certainly some bumps in the road, but there are also some, high moments. Those high moments, of course, being our keynote speakers. I think if we ever have to do this again, we've kind of laid the foundation on how to do this event. One of our students actually... from Massachusetts, I believe, was UMass, was actually back at her home in London. And she was zooming across the Atlantic to talk to designers. So she would, I think it worked. So thank you to everyone who participated.
From, I guess I was a respondent's point of view, I thought it was fantastic. I had some amazing discussions with these students coming out, and a lot of the students fed back to me that they actually loved this format because it gives them private one-on-one discussions. As great as the event is, and I've been to Steve's events and many portfolio reviews like the Clam Bake and things like that. Yeah, it's great. You got community, you've got all these people there. It's really kind of cool, but it's really difficult to sit down and focus for a half an hour on a student's work. Or just have a discussion with the person about what their plans are and how I can help them. All I can tell you is that everyone did a great job and they had very interesting work and they were all quite mature and handled it quite well. So thanks, Steve, for doing this. It was a huge success. I know, just speaking from my point of view and from what the students have told me. And the funny thing is that out of those 15 students that I interviewed, 10 of them were Light Talk listeners. And some of them asked questions that they wanted on the show.
Oh, great.
And one of the questions is on our show today. You know, it's going to be interesting next year, if indeed you return to this format through necessity or through choice, or go back to the old format. I think you ought to think about it. I really do.
Well, one of the discussions that came up with the committee that we had who worked on this year, Kip Marsh up at Brooklyn, Rob Perry at Illinois, Claudia Stevens at Meadows, and Anna Kepeloff at Massachusetts, was that an in-person showcase in New York is important, but not everyone can afford to get there. So the question is, do we have kind of a two-level portfolio review next year, and we take a look at some students who can't get to New York for financial reasons, and that is part of our virtual portfolio review.
That's great. Congratulations. So, this is a big show today. We should get started. Steve has our first listener question.
Yes, this comes from Paula, and she writes, I'm not sure where to find a job this year. Any suggestions? Well, I've got a bunch of suggestions for you. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to bunker down wherever you are and stay safe, and you're going to get a phone book. And you're going to open that phone book, and you're going to start looking through it for everyone in there who could use a lighting designer. You're going to start, forget about theaters and dance companies and opera companies. I mean, that's kind of the obvious thing, so that's an easy one. But you're going to find out who's running the community access television station. You're going to take a look at the local television stations. You're going to call ad agencies about industrials. You're going to talk to photographers. Not all of them do their own lighting setups, particularly the ones who are working outside. You're going to call the local school district and tell them who you are. You're going to make a reel, just like an actor makes a reel, but you're going to make a reel of your rock and roll pre-viz work, and you're going to show that to the local clubs. And if there's a local production company, you're going to go show it to them. You're going to walk around looking for lighting problems you can solve. And then you're going to confront that potential client and say, I notice you have a problem. I think I could help you with this, and perhaps that gets you a job. You're going to go to every local church and see what they're doing with their services, whether they're online, whether they have a TV ministry, just the lighting in the church. You are going to update your resume, your website. You're going to get your portfolio in shape. So when everything reopens, you are ready to hit the ground running. And then when you have a little spare time, because I think you're going to find a job, when you have a little spare time, you're going to sharpen your computer skills and address your weaknesses.
One thing that I've been encouraging my students to do in the past, but now maybe even it's more prevalent, is if they go to a website and we see, okay, you have a good reel and you've got dynamics and you've got cues changing, that's great. But one of the things that's sort of missing is if I can't meet you nowadays, I've always encouraged my students to do something under the reel where you speak, where you narrate, where you talk a little bit, and the potential person who's looking for somebody can hear you. I think voice, like a podcast, I think people know our voices, and I think voice matters. It's sort of an level of intimacy. And in fact, this year we spent a lot of energy creating online portfolio reviews. It took many, many, many hours. We did 33 reviews. And one student who happened to have a broadcast background from high school said, "Can I break the rules?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?"
Which rule?
Well, we had a whole set of FAQs about how to put this together because no one had done it before, and it went remarkably smooth. And like what you guys are saying about Showcase East, we're probably going to keep this method. It actually was better because they got better reviews because we all looked at the work in advance and we had time to give comments online and we used Canvas. But the point I'm making about this one particular student is I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I have techniques that I could use where I could actually do what I would normally do in a face-to-face portfolio review in my online, on my website." And I said, "You know what? I can't speak for the rest of the faculty, but go ahead and break the rule because it sounds good to me." So what she did is she actually videotaped herself in front of a green screen, talked about her work, superimposed herself over the presentation. And so she was there speaking about her work, and we could see her, and we could see her mannerisms, we could hear her voice, we could see her face, and she was taking us through her work. And everybody loved it. So I think there's an opportunity there. Within this new mode of operating, I think there is some hidden gems that we're going to find, and that was one of them that we found this year. So for Paula, not only did she make her work become presented in a more interesting way, but she also picked up new skills in the process. So it was a double gain in that regard.
That's fantastic. There's one more thing that I just thought about, and it came from a student. She was an amazingly intelligent woman. What she's studying, because I looked at all her special skills, and there were programs I never heard of. And I said, okay, what is this program? And she says, these are video game lighting programs.
Yeah.
Lighting design programs, atmospheric lighting. And this. Yeah. And I said, this is brilliant.
Can I throw one more software out there?
Absolutely.
The student that did this work uses OBS, Open Broadcast Suite, or system, or software. And I'm just getting my head around that. And you could actually feed Zoom through that and switch camera. There's a lot of capability out there that those of us who are rooted in stage, I think we all, including us three, need to expand our toolkit as well.
Well, we are already at my university, because we're basically doing everything online again next semester.
Right.
So we came up with projects, actual productions, and that's part of the software we're all dealing with.
Yep.
The whole OBS thing.
Yep.
So this is all really exciting stuff that's going on.
It is exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, out of a little bit of lemons, you make some lemonade, and
Absolutely.
you expand. You expand your teachers, you expand the students. I think that all this is very, very exciting.
I think we run towards the problem, not away from it. That's what artists do.
There you go. Hey, Trey in Normal writes, well, first of all, I got to say, Trey was one of the students, that I interviewed, I think it was 2 days ago. And again, super bright, amazing. And he was the one who's listened to our show since episode 3. Anyway, Trey's great. And his classmates are great as well. So I just want to go on the record. But Trey writes, how do you explain to a stage manager to call the cue on the crescendo when the stage manager neither reads nor has a feel for music?
That's a tough one. Wow.
Yeah. First of all stage managers should be trained in reading scores. As a matter of fact, we're doing these series of workshops over the summer, and I'm talking about my faculty, select members of faculty, that are actually focusing in on skills like this. And one of them is following a score, and also how to understand music. So one of my colleagues, Sarah Underwood, who's an amazing jazz musician, and I'm a jazz musician too, decided to go ahead and do this 4-segment workshop on this. It's very, very important that you understand how to follow a score. Now, if worse comes to worse, you could say to a stage manager, well, you can feel as the energy starts rising in this moment, right? And the trumpets are blaring, bah! And they can't hear it because they don't have a feel to music. As a stage manager, you got to get trained. You got to get that, because no matter what you do, even in straight plays, you can't always take a cue off a line.
Nope.
Right?
It's intuitive. There's an intuitive factor.
It's intuitive.
Yeah.
Right. And a funny thing, another student yesterday asked me, how do you tell a stage manager to take a cue on an action and not on a line? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, sometimes this actor gets up and crosses stage right 3 lines before he's supposed to move, and I want that light to move. Ooh. And I said, well, you just say that. You tell her this is a visual cue. And she said, well, I told her that, but she says it has to be attached to the line. No. Even the professional stage managers, there are 3 basic cues. You take one on the music, you take it on a visual, or you take it in a sequence of other cues happening.
Yeah. This is a tough one. I've had a stage manager like this once as well, who insisted it had to be, in the script. And I would say, so I think the only answer I would offer to Trey is, if you can communicate to the stage manager the result of the cue, like where you want it to land, and what is the ultimate, where does it finish, then they can back it up, hopefully, and say go at the time so it lands where you want it to land, or the intent of the cue. But they have to have a certain level of intuition. It's sort of like, years ago I used to teach stage management, and I would sort of say something like this. So you see the action or you hear the word or whatever, and you say the go, and then out of your mouth it goes into the microphone through the headset system, travels to the headset system, gets to the operator. The operator hears it. His brain does that. He pushes the button. The button then sends a signal to the dimmers. The dimmers then move. Then the light changes. Then you're sitting in the audience, and then the light reaches the retina of the audience member, who then processes it in their brain. Now there's a lot of nanoseconds in there, okay, between all of that happening, but I don't think you can do that mathematically. It's intuitive. It's like you've got to have a certain amount of information, and then you've got to rely on your instinct about when to say that go word, and then you practice. It's a bit improvisational to get, but the designer has to know the result of what they want the cue to do. And I think communicating that can be helpful to somebody who doesn't have a feel for it. Maybe, but I think it's a tough one.
Well, you can always time code. You can always go in and find a place that the stage manager does recognize.
Right.
And call the cue there and put a delay on it. It's because the music is going to be constant.
Yeah.
It's not going to change. So, there are workarounds with this, but, it's probably if you can't read music or if you don't have a feel for it, maybe opera is not where you want to head as a stage manager.
Yeah, but this is my thought about all this, Steve. A stage manager not knowing how to follow a score is like a lighting designer who only lights Noel Coward comedies.
Oh, agreed. You're really limiting yourself.
And it's so easy to learn how to do it. You don't need to take 3 years of music lessons. I mean, my colleague and I are going to do it in like an hour, right, over 3 sessions. And as a matter of fact, if anyone's interested in it, it's open to anybody. So just contact me privately, and I'll give you the time, the date, and you are welcome to join us.
Well, I'm going to join you with my lighting design students. So count me in.
Yes, please do. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I will give you all the information. Because we're having 2 classes. One is just following a score, and the other one is music theory for theater students.
Oh, please share that with me as well. I'd like to make that available to my students too.
Absolutely. Everybody is invited.
That's great. I have a question about that, David, because I don't read music, but I have a good feel for it.
That's great.
But I think I can. I think I can follow a score without reading the notes, can't I? Because it's
can if you understand what repeats are.
Yes, I do that.
Sometimes things repeat.
Yeah.
You certainly can, because the way we teach it is through pitch. If you don't know how to read notes, it's very simple. As the notes go up on the staff, the pitch gets higher. As the notes go down, the pitch gets.
I can see that. Yeah, I can play the guitar, so I could read the music enough to know where the repeats are and read the chord diagram, so I can follow. And that's how I can identify where I want a cue in the score, but I don't read music to play an instrument.
That's how I learned. I didn't call it pitch, I called it tone.
But there's also ways to follow a score by the orchestration. These are things that we're actually going to be talking about during these workshops and learning how to listen to music. I mean, really listen to music so that it makes score following really quite simple. So again, getting back to that situation where the stage manager wouldn't take a sight cue, a visual cue, well, that probably means is that stage manager has his or her head buried in the script and is never looking up. They're just following lines. And that is the most dangerous thing a stage manager can do. Because what if someone drops a prop on stage, right? And there's a broken glass, and they haven't seen it. If they see it, they call to the other, say, next person, just move all that glass away. Or if you're doing some complicated scene shift and things, a wagon is trucking off, a drop is flying in, you have people on stage, certain fly cues need to be sight cues, or else you may kill somebody. If somebody's late in a move, you have a drop coming in, hitting them in the head. So stage managers need to understand that there are reasons for visual cues and reasons for line cues and reasons for musical cues, just for safety.
So Zachary writes, how do you talk to a programmer? Is it in syntax? Well, I talk to my programmers very nicely, calmly. And like Ken Billington says, I don't like to repeat myself, which means they should be paying attention. When I was a tech lighting designer and I was talking to a young person who barely knew what they were programming, syntax might work. Right, you might speak, and we sort of all grew up speaking syntax in our generation because it's sort of the engineers who made the light boards were engineers, and they spoke a certain way, and so we had to learn the language of the boards, right? And then everybody remembers when things changed and moving lights came along, and I remember being excited. I think it was Whole Hog at the time. oh, I could actually name stuff. Like I could call it the blue backlight. I didn't have to use a number, and I could use English. That was a big shift, right? So, okay, now we're speaking in the language of the art, or we're speaking in something that somebody who's not an engineer understands. Oh, the blue backlight, as opposed to channel 28. Channel 28 to the director meant nothing, or group 28, whatever. So I think there was a shift there. And I do have people now who really just like to speak the syntax. Now, I don't know, and maybe some designers who grew up that way, speaking syntax and are comfortable with it, like to do the syntax because they know what the board can do. There may be good reasons for that. I have moved away from that. And I guess it depends. If you're teaching and you've got a student who's learning a console and the designer knows the syntax, that might be a good educational endeavor. But if I have a really experienced programmer, I don't want to tell them what button to push. They know better what buttons to push to get to the result that I'm looking for artistically. Plus, if I'm speaking out loud and other people can hear me, hell, man, I'm a poet. I'm going to talk about how I want this to look, and then we're going to see how the programmer makes that happen. So I prefer to speak as an artist as opposed to a technologist in that phase of the work. And I don't do that much designing for theater anymore, but I just recently programmed a space. I had a very experienced programmer, and I never gave that person a channel number or syntax at all. But what I did give them was I went to Adobe and I created these palettes, these color palettes for different holidays. And I basically handed him the palettes and said, this is Christmas. This is St. Patrick's Day. This is Breast Cancer Awareness Week. And then I would just speak in image and idea and concept and visuals. And he would cook it up. And I would say, okay, yeah, but that's a little bit too bright. Or it was just a vernacular experience. And I think that's more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, it just depends on what sort of relationship you have with the programmer.
Yeah.
And how long you've worked with that programmer. I will call out channels. I'll call out groups because that's the easiest way of identifying something. Hit the chair at fixture 101. You know what I mean? That's not the syntax because his syntax would be 101, pan, tilt, whatever. So I don't say pan, tilt, pan, tan. No, I don't do that. Sometimes I've had to.
I think you're right about the relationship. Yeah.
And a lot of programmers that know me, like Dave in Central City, has worked with me. He's programmed with me for 18 years.
That's a deep relationship.
He knows what I want. He knows what to do. He sets up all the focus
He's probably
points.
got it there before you even say it.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I'll say, hey, Dave, I need this fire effect happening upstage left. And any particular fixtures? And I said, yeah, let's just use the upstage ones or whatever.
Right. That's what I like.
Yeah, that's the best of all worlds. But if it's a new programmer, and especially if they speak a different language, that's a whole nother story.
Oh, you mean a different language, like national language? That's a whole other ball of wax.
Right. I'm working in Helsinki on this new musical, but the good news is that the programmer his English is very good. And I had this great meeting with him yesterday, and I feel, we're not going to have any problems on this one. This is going to be fantastic. Steve, how about you?
Well, Zachary, since you've asked this question, I'm going to assume you are young and inexperienced. Let me tell you the dirty little secret. That dirty little secret is pre-visualization. And in pre-viz, there's a misconception that you're designing the whole show and laying it out, and you walk into the theater and you tweak it a little bit. For me, pre-visualization is an opportunity for the programmer and I to work through the show and build some skeletons, build some foundation.
Yeah.
So we're there together
creating
base looks, foundation looks, color palettes. So by the time we get into the theater, he or she and I have created a structure together. So we already have a common vocabulary. And when I get into the theater, then what you're seeing me doing is waving my arms around a lot, saying I want the lights to move like this or that or whatever. And the programmer, if they're good, is programming rather rapidly. And maybe making suggestions and saying there's 3 different ways we could make this thing happen. Let me show you all 3, and I select way number 2. And there is a blending there of designer and programmer. It's why I look at my programmers today and list them as associate designers.
Well, You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers, and this week, Light Talk is sponsored by...
Better Than Nothing Industries agrees with Professor Harold Hill when he said, "Mothers of River City, heed that warning before it's too late. Watch for the telltale sign of corruption." Ladies and gentlemen, we have all seen the changes to our children once they become teenagers. The minute your son leaves the house, does he rebuckle his knickerbockers below the knee? Is there a nicotine stain on his index finger? But where do our children learn this behavior? High School Musicals, that's where. We have all been there. We are watching a perfectly fine musical. Then the frisky dance scene starts. A seductive drum beat. The air is thick with scented haze. Then out of the darkness, flashing, colored lights. And all too soon, your child, little Timmy, is in a trance thinking, this is real life. Don't believe me? When was the last time you saw Grease, In the Heights, Hairspray, Bye Bye Birdie, or Cabaret? The list goes on and on. Then your child comes home that night humming a show tune. And as Professor Harold Hill points out, you got trouble. We're in terrible, terrible trouble. But what can the good men and women of the PTA and the principal do? New for 2020, Better Than Nothing Industries introduces the Stay Safe. Stay Safe is a portable wireless handheld blackout button. Now when that frisky dance scene starts, the principal can kill the lights with a push of a button. When the dance number is over, 2 clicks and the lights restore. But it does not stop there. Stay Safe is perfect for pep rallies, wrestling matches, and controversial inspirational speakers. Anytime you need to push the morality reset button, Stay Safe is in your pocket. Stay safe. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those crazy ducks in the background tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About segment is, are theater schools ready to reopen?
Not quite.
Teaching theater in a COVID-19 world. Well, the reason why this is so topical right now is because yesterday my school made news. A lot of big news, actually.
Your whole statewide system.
Yes. Chancellor Timothy White, who is the chancellor of the entire California State University system, which has 23 campuses, 500,000 students, and about 60,000 faculty and staff, announced to the world that we will not be going back to do face-to-face classes in the fall. That fall is going to be, it's all going to be online. He was on Chris Cuomo's show yesterday, and it was a great interview, and I actually posted it on Facebook, where he explains why, without getting into all the reasons. Basically, when you're talking about 500,000 students among 23 campuses, if they were going to follow any social distancing rules, they would have to take their classroom sizes to like 20% of the total class size. So if you had 50 students in a class, you could have 10 students in that class. So obviously that's not going to work. Also, just for public safety, health of the students, health of the faculty, over 10% of our faculty is over 65, and health of the staff. So he made that decision, and he did it soon so that the faculty can prepare adequately.
Right.
Which is really smart, because the last thing in the world that we wanted was to wait, and then have to throw something together at the last minute, like we had to do in the middle of last semester. A lot of us did okay, but it could have been better had we had more time to prepare. We've been seeing the writing on the wall for quite a while. So for the past 4 weeks, we've been preparing, and we've actually come up with a whole series of those workshops I talked about earlier, but also just revamping our classes so that they will work, figuring out what type of productions to do so that they are exciting experiences and our students actually learn design. They actually go through the design process. So we're still working on it, obviously, but at least we got a head start. So I'm feeling really good about that decision personally. How do you guys feel?
Well, we're trying to take a different approach and reopen our campus starting in September. And everything you say is true. We are trying to figure out how to social distance. The problem for us, at least in the theater department, is not so much having a class with 10 or 12 people in it. I think we can get around that. We control all of our own spaces, so we can kind of make that work. The problem we're facing is, how do we rehearse a show? How do we then mount that show? And when you start running numbers, it's hard to find a play that doesn't require 10 or more people. Now, when I say that, you have actors, a director, assistant director, stage managers, designers in the room. That's problematic. We can handle the audience, but we haven't quite figured out how to do that. And we talk about live streaming and things like that, but we still having a hard time figuring out the rehearsal of it. So we are kind of keeping an eye on the athletic department and how they are approaching what they're doing and seeing if there's any lessons there to be learned. I mean, people are anxious to get back to school. My daughter is all worried about whether she'll be on campus up at the University of British Columbia this fall or at home. And she certainly doesn't want to be home with me taking her classes online.
Mm-hmm. That's the issue.
But it's kind of a scary time. I know our listeners say, oh, don't talk about that. Talk about Licos and gel. But this is something that's really impacting a lot of young design students. Mm-hmm. Every one of them have graduated, from Showcase, the Showcase East thing. Everyone who graduated had a diploma in their hand, and I would say 90% of them all had summer jobs lined up.
Yep.
And they all had their fall figured out. They were heading to New York or Chicago or Miami or LA, and all that's in chaos now. So, I worry about this, not being able to get back onto the campus. I worry about my third-year students. All of a sudden, in the second year of the program, spring semester, we canceled 5 productions. Mm-hmm. That is, 15 or 20 design opportunities.
Yeah, valuable
that just went out the door.
Valuable teaching
Absolutely.
Right.
People were just, starting to hit their stride a little bit. They were taking on new challenges, and then that stopped. And I don't want that momentum to slow down even more going into the fall. So smarter people than I are going to figure this out.
Listen, you learn theater by doing theater. And what we're trying to do with these alternative productions that are going to be online is to recreate the process as well as we can. Yes, I feel really bad for all these students, but hey, this has happened to all of us. We have professional designers who aren't working. Hell, Ken Billington's not working.
People who have shows running on Broadway are not getting their AWC either right now, right?
And some of them, who aren't in good stand, can't pay their rent. So it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while until live entertainment comes back. So I think that we just need to use our imaginations and come up with real positive and effective teaching methods to replace the productions. That's the only thing I can suggest. How about you, Stan?
Well, a couple of thoughts. So first of all, I really applaud your chancellor for saying what needs to be said when other programs are, I think, taking a huge risk, or say they're going to take a risk. We'll see if they really take that risk. I think some schools are kicking the can so they can make some plans. One dark side perspective that I heard from a colleague was, the fiscal quarter ends for state schools. This affects you and I, David, maybe not so much Steve, but the fiscal quarter ends June 30th, so tuitions are going to become due in June. And some of them just might be waiting until that money comes in before they announce, which is sort of a dark side strategic possibility that maybe my school is waiting for that. I don't know. They are waiting on making an announcement. There was an article in the Times yesterday that showed the percentage of schools who have announced, who are waiting, or who are saying they're going to open, and then others who are somewhere in between. It was interesting to look at that pie chart. So with that said, I think it was Matthew McConaughey who said, I don't know if he said this or he got this from somebody else, what needs to happen is we need to slow down the spread so that science can catch up, right? And I think that's really thoughtful. When science catches up, And I'm looking at my phone right now and saying countries who opened up are now pulling, 2 weeks later, are now pulling back because they're seeing what all the experts predicted. On the positive side, the summer productions that we are doing are moving forward in interesting ways. And we're using that as a pilot. We have shipped microphones to actors' homes. We are in the process of buying lighting kits where our lighting designers will direct actors how to illuminate themselves in their basically location lighting. There is work being done, and we're going to see how that goes this summer. And I would predict that we will do that in a more robust way with full force, enthusiasm, and creativity in the fall. And I look at it as a glass half full scenario, that the skill sets that we can teach during this time are skill sets that we probably ought to or should have been teaching before, because I don't know a lot about location and lighting, but I'm going to learn. But I do know a lot about how to control lights remotely. I think anybody who really thinks we're going to be doing face-to-face production in the fall before science catches up is either dreaming or irresponsible. And I think the state system in California has done the right thing, and I hope that others will see that wisdom.
Well, good luck to everybody. This is the time to use your imaginations, and for students too. We've actually asked a lot of students to be involved as well. To find out what ideas they have, and a lot of them are already creating theater.
They're doing
it already.
So they're already doing it, and they're doing it amazingly well. That's right. They're not burying their heads in the sand, and we need to join together. And I think there's win-wins in this situation until science catches up.
You know something, guys? We've all had a tough few months. And I've never felt better than right now, because you gave me hope. You really did. I mean, this whole thing now is just seems to be a real positive step.
That's how I feel. We need to be enthusiastic. We need to run towards it with all of our creativity, and knowing that it's temporary, and knowing that we have that, and not fooling ourselves. It's Churchill, man. It's like, you have to inspire each other. And the trick is not to be overly ambitious. I did see something that ran for like an hour, and I'm like, oh my God, I turned it off. I couldn't watch it. Let's be realistic. Let's start small. Let's focus. Let's get to the truth. Let's get to the beats in the scene. We get all these skills that we didn't have before. This is exciting. That's how I feel.
Cool. So Steve has our final listener question today.
Yes, Janet from Bismarck asks, I teach at a high school, and we are looking for a very simple but powerful lighting controller. We don't have any moving lights, but we are converting all of our lighting fixtures to LED. Do you have any suggestions? Yes, I'm not going to bore you with details and facts and figures, because you're going to call the manufacturer up and you're going to have them come, the manufacturer, not the salesperson.
Right.
The manufacturer is going to come and demo this for you and talk to you about what your specific needs are. Mm-hmm. So there are 3. They're all under $10,000 street price. I would say the one that people aren't going to think about, but is a fantastic console, high-end systems, the Hedgehog 4. Mm-hmm. That little guy is incredibly powerful, and it will grow as your needs grow.
Yeah.
The other one is the Old Faithful, and that's ETC's Ion. It's been around in some form or fashion since the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
It's a workhorse. Well, no, I mean, think about the vision and the idea.
Yes, the vision and the idea, right.
And so there's the kind of foundation for the Ion's construction.
Right, right.
There are tons and tons and tons of YouTube videos and online forums that talk about the Ion and will walk you through how to learn how to use it. But again, it's not terribly difficult. And finally, the one that people are going to yell at me, but I really like, is Strand's Neo.
Yeah, it's good.
The Neo console. All 3 of those, Hedgehog, Ion, Neo, they all come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They're all very inexpensive when you start looking at consoles, and all 3 of these are going to be able to expand as your needs expand.
Can I add one little thing that if her budget is so tight, you could get a Nomad for a PC. So all you really need is any old PC. It doesn't take a lot of power to run it, and the little DMX output and the key, and that's really and if you don't have moving lights, if you have moving lights, then you probably want those dials, right? But if for LEDs and conventionals, you could if money is a push and you can't get the board itself, you're basically getting the same software and the DMX with a PC or a Mac and the Nomad widget gadget, I think it's called, and the key for even less money.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
This goes way back to episode 6, I believe.
If you're going to buy Nomad, then I'm sorry, Tom. If you're going to go down and get a Nomad, go down to Home Depot and get yourself a plugging box and some on-off switches.
There you go.
I mean, you want something that's. If you're going to do this, do it right
What's
one
the difference,
time.
Steve? It's the same software.
You do it so you can run a theater show. Do it so you can do a band concert. Do it so you can do a pep rally, and more importantly, do it so your students in high school can learn how to program and expand and do all kinds of wonderful things and make it easy.
Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can listen to Light Talk on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, Google, and all of your favorite podcast sites. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk fun.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you buy a Nomad and you choose to litigate,
You will.
the law firm of Fleck, Flock, Flair, and Glare will defend me until my retirement funds are
And
depleted.
Snoot will be looking for an eye on.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And tune in next week when we discuss more of what's happening in this crazy lighting industry.
That's all of it, and a new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Stay healthy and stay happy. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
And wear a mask, it can't hurt you.